killer hid their secret in a simple menu, but Nero Wolfe never misses a detail. Welcome to Clue Lore. I'm your host, Vale. Tell me in the comments where you're watching from today. Your voices always brighten this mystery. Let's begin. If there's one thing you learn fast working for Nero Wolfe, it's that trouble doesn't knock before it comes in. It rings, maybe, if it's polite trouble. More often, it just shows up in your lap while you're trying to keep the household running smooth, like a waiter balancing champagne flutes through a crowded room. That Tuesday had started the way God and Fritz Brenner intended it to. Quiet, orderly, and smelling like heaven, getting ready for lunch. Wolfe was upstairs in the plant rooms doing his 2-hour orchid communion. That left the brownstone in the competent hands of Fritz, Theodore Horstman, and me. Fritz was in the kitchen in a state of controlled ecstasy, preparing one of those lunches that should be classified as a federal landmark. Theodore was in the front room doing what Theodore does, waging a grim war against dust and disorder, as if specks were a personal insult. I was in the office, feet on the desk, pretending to read a newspaper while actually watching the clock so I wouldn't miss the exact moment Wolfe would roll in and announce that punctuality is the last refuge of civilization. At 10:37, the doorbell rang. Theodore gave me a look that said, "This is your circus," so I went out to the hall and opened the door. The woman on the stoop had the kind of composure that usually comes with either a lot of money or a lot of practice at not letting the world see it shake. She was in her late 30s, maybe 40, dressed in a dark camel coat that cost what I make in a month, and holding a slim leather folder like it was a stage prop. Dark hair pinned neatly, mouth drawn into a line, currently negotiating with impatience. Before I could ask who she was, she said, "Archie Goodwin. Unless you're here to sell vacuum cleaners, and then I'm Theodore." Her mouth twitched just barely. "I'm Cordelia Hearth. I need to see Mr. Wolfe." "Everybody does. He's up in the orchids doing his daily duel with nature. If your need is life or death and you brought a body, I can take a message." "It is life or death," she said evenly. "And no body, not yet." Those last two words were delivered like she hated giving me the courtesy of an explanation. That got my attention. I stepped aside. "Come in. You can wait in the office. Theodore, hold the fort." Theodore made a noise that lived somewhere between a grunt and a sigh, and went back to his dust campaign. Cordelia Hearth followed me into the office without looking around, which meant either she'd been here before or she was too wound up to notice. She stood by Wolfe's chair as if the room were a doctor's waiting area and she'd been told not to touch anything. I said, "Sit down. We don't charge for chair time, unless the case goes official. I prefer to stand. Suit yourself. If Wolfe sees you standing in his office, it'll either annoy him or make him curious. Those are the only two gears he owns." She glanced at me as if I'd just introduced a new species of insect. "How long will he be?" "Orchids get 2 hours. People get whatever's left." I went behind my desk, opened my notebook out of habit, and gave her my best Archie's ready-to-be-impressed look. "Tell me why you're here, Miss Hearth." She didn't even blink. 2 nights ago, at a private dinner, someone altered a menu. "Well," I said, "that's a capital crime in this house, but I'm not sure it's one in the state of New York." She ignored the line. It was a tasting dinner for 8, the chef's new winter lineup. One course was removed, another was inserted. The card stock was identical, the typography matched. I didn't see it until the plates came out. "Okay," I said. "If you're a restaurateur having nightmares about fonts, I'd suggest a vacation." Her eyes sharpened. The dish that was inserted contained an allergen. Ah, there it was. The word allergen in a city like this can be a loaded pistol. "Who got hit?" "No one," she said, "because the person it was meant for didn't eat it." She excused herself before the course arrived. She said she felt ill. Convenient. Who was she? Marina Holt. I whistled softly. Marina Holt wasn't just anyone. She was the kind of food critic who could make a restaurant or break it, and she'd done both. Her blog, Holt Takes, had an audience that could empty a dining room with a single 3-star shrug. People in the business used her name like sailors use weather, with respect and dread. You're telling me somebody tried to poison Marina Holt at a tasting dinner by swapping a course on the menu? Not poison. Not strictly. She opened the leather folder and slid out a single sheet, holding it so I could read. That is the original menu. You can see the 4th course, chestnut velouté with black truffle foam. That was removed. She laid down a second printout beside it. That is what was served. 4th course, sea urchin custard with candied walnut crumble. Candied walnut, I said. If Holt is allergic to nuts, she is. Severely. It's a matter of public record. Cordelia's voice stayed steady, but her hand tightened on the folder. The kitchen had strict protocols. No nuts were to be within 20 feet of her plate. The chef designed the tasting around that. The dish served wasn't even in our prep list. Someone brought it in. I leaned back, letting it settle. The brownstone likes its cases wrapped neat. Bodies for bodies, thieves for thieves. But in Wolfe's world, intent matters as much as outcome. An attempted murder through culinary sabotage. That was new even for us. So why come to Wolfe? Call the police. I did. Or rather, I called Inspector Kramer. He told me he couldn't open an investigation without a victim or a crime besides tampering with paper. He suggested I consult Mr. Wolfe. That tracked. Kramer had a soft spot for Wolfe, the same way a bulldog has a soft spot for steak. He growled a lot, but he knew quality when he smelled it. What's your stake in all this? I asked. You the chef? The hostess? Holt's lawyer? I'm the owner, she said. The dinner was at my restaurant. And you don't want it to become public because attempted murder pairs poorly with a prefix? Her eyes settled on me like ice on a pond. If Marina Holt had eaten that dish, she'd be dead. In my dining room, under my name. Whoever did this wanted that. I want to know who, and I want to stop them before they try again. That was reasonable. Also personal, which is the kind of cocktail Wolfe takes seriously even when he pretends he doesn't. Who was at the dinner? I asked. 8 people. Marina Holt, Chef Lucien Vale, his sous chef, Kira Dam, our sommelier, Benno Kress, my business partner, Everett Pike, a food investor, Lionel Varick, his wife, Juno, and me. Nice little zoo, I said. You said someone inserted a course. Kitchen staff live and die by prep lists. Whoever did that needed access to. Not the kitchen, she cut in. The kitchen line was sealed. Only Vale, Dam, and Benno were inside during service. Front of house was me and my floor manager, who wasn't at the dinner. The menus were printed earlier that day and placed at each setting before anyone arrived. When the guests sat down, the menus were already there. Which means, I said, if someone swapped menus, they did it before the dinner, in a room that I'm guessing wasn't crawling with security. It was my private dining room, she said. We keep it for tastings and investors. It's next to my office. The door was locked after setup. Only I have the key. Only you should have the key, I corrected. Restaurant keys get around like gossip. She didn't argue. Instead, she said, this is why I need Mr. Wolfe. I don't know who to suspect because I don't know why. Let's save the why until I have the who list in my head. Motives often show up late, like bad guests. She was about to answer when the elevator in the hall side opened and shut. A moment later, the man himself came into the office, already radiating that particular brand of irritation that means someone has made him late for something he considers sacred. Nero Wolfe looked even bigger in his yellow silk shirt, his face composed in its usual mixture of contempt for human inefficiency and appetite for human folly. He saw Cordelia standing and stopped like someone had put a tack under his heel. Archie, he said, there is a stranger in my office. The stranger is Miss Cordelia Harth, I said. She brought a Problem shaped like a menu. That word landed. Wolfe's eyes moved to her with slow, assessing gravity. For a man who had lived half his life dodging the world, he could still read a person the way Fritz reads a recipe. "Sit down," he told her. She hesitated a fraction of a second and then, to my surprise, did. Wolfe has that effect. I've seen district attorneys, millionaires, and prize fighters do what he says without realizing why, until it's over. Wolfe lowered himself into his chair with ceremony, adjusted a fold of his shirt, and said, "You have 10 minutes, madam. Archie, remain silent." "Dream on," I muttered, but softly. Cordelia repeated the story for Wolfe, with the precision of someone who had rehearsed it to keep her fear on a leash. She showed him the 2 menus. She explained Holt's allergy, the swapped course, the list of attendees, the locked room, the police brush-off. Wolfe listened without moving, hands tented over his stomach, eyes half-lidded as if he were considering a rare truffle. When she finished, Silence sat down at the table with us. At last Wolfe said, "You were fortunate, yet fortune is transient. Your purpose is to prevent a repetition." "Yes." "And to ascertain the culprit." "Yes." His eyes narrowed slightly. The attempt was not improvised. It required foreknowledge of Miss Holt's allergy and of the dinner's structure. It required access to the menu stock and to the dining room. It required a willingness to risk scandal. Therefore, the motive is not merely malice. It is strategic. Cordelia leaned forward. "Strategic how?" "Ah, that is what we shall discover. Archie, you may speak." "Thanks, boss." I turned to her. "Where did the inserted dish come from? You said it wasn't on your prep list." "It wasn't," she said. "But after we realized what had happened, Chef Vale found a half-pan of sea urchin custard in the cold holding unit. Labeled in his handwriting." Wolfe's brows rose. "In his handwriting? He swears he didn't put it there. Kira Dam says she didn't. Benno had no reason to be in cold prep. The holding unit is in a locked alcove only kitchen leads and I can access." Wolfe looked at me and I could see the gears start meshing. "Archie, what is your opinion?" "My opinion is that someone wants a dead critic and a ruined restaurant, and they picked their method because it makes the death look like an unfortunate accident. Allergies in a dining room don't scream murder unless someone's watching closely." "Exactly," Wolfe said. Cordelia's voice went tight. "Then you will take it?" Wolfe didn't answer right away. He never does when it involves committing himself to leaving his chair mentally, even if not physically. He stared at the menus for a long moment, then set them down as if they were evidence at a trial. "Archie," he said, "what is for lunch?" "Fritz is doing something French, probably. Illegal in 5 states. "Good." Wolfe turned to Cordelia. "I dislike disturbances. I dislike them more when they involve food. I'm intrigued by the audacity of attempting murder through a menu. I will accept the case." She exhaled like a woman remembering to breathe. "However," Wolfe added, "because there is always a however. I will not be hurried. The enemy is subtle. So must we be. You will provide complete access to your staff, your premises, and the guests who attended. You will also provide a retainer of $2,000. She didn't flinch. "Done. I'll have my accountant send it today." Wolfe nodded once. "You will also refrain from confronting anyone yourself. Your indignation is understandable but unproductive. Leave the strategy to me." "I will," she said quietly. "Thank you." Wolfe waved a hand in dismissal. His version of "please go away before lunch" is ruined. When she stood, he said one more thing, almost casually. "Miss Harth." She paused. "Murder rarely begins with a dish. It begins with a relationship. Tell me, was Marina Holt expected to publish a review after this dinner?" Cordelia's face stayed composed, but her eyes flickered. "No," she said. "She was expected to publish nothing. She was there because she had a secret to sell." Then she walked out before I could ask what kind of secret. I looked at Wolfe. He looked at me. He said, "Archie, you will find out what secret Marina Holt possessed and who at that table would pay for her silence or her death." I grinned. "Sure, I'll just stroll over to the critic's lair and ask her for her confidential blackmail portfolio." Wolfe ignored me with professional elegance. "Also, you will go to the restaurant this afternoon. Examine the private dining room. Speak with the chef and staff. Observe without provoking. If you provoke, do it usefully." "Yes, sir." He settled deeper into his chair. "Now, lunch." That was the brownstone for you, a case involving a menu that might hide a murder, an owner who owns, fear the way some women own pearls, a critic with a secret to sell, and Wolfe already steering the ship from his chair before I'd even found my coat. I got up, pocketed the 2 menus, and headed for the door. Behind me, Wolfe called, "Archie." I turned. He said, "If anyone has tampered with a menu, they have tampered with civilization. I expect you to be civilized." "Always," I said. "Right up until it's inconvenient." And then I went out to find a secret that could kill a woman without ever touching her plate. I ate lunch with one eye on Fritz's souffle and the other on Wolfe, because when he's thinking hard, his fork slows down. That day it didn't. He treated the duck the way a bishop treats communion. Solemn, appreciative, and entirely sure the world could wait. The world, unfortunately, doesn't take orders from Nero Wolfe. But I do. So at 1:30, I was out the door with the menus in my pocket and a cold December wind trying to make a project out of me. Cordelia Hearth's restaurant, L'Atelier Hearth, was on West 57th, the kind of place that makes you lower your voice before you've even seen the maitre d'. The awning was discreet, the windows expensive, and the people coming in looked like they'd practiced being nonchalant about money. I gave my name to a host who wore a suit with more confidence than fabric and got steered straight past the lunch crowd to a corridor that smelled faintly of citrus polish and ambition. Cordelia met me at the private dining room door. Up close, you could see the strain better. Not shaking, not sloppy, just a tightness around the eyes like she'd been sleeping in a suit of armor. "Thank you for coming so soon," she said. "Wolfe doesn't move fast unless food is involved. Then he sprints. Mentally." She didn't smile. She unlocked the door with a brass key, and we stepped into a room that looked like secrecy had been decorated by a Swiss architect. Long walnut table, 8 chairs, soft gray walls with one abstract painting that probably cost more than the table. The kind of room where people say terrible things politely. Cordelia stood at the head of the table. "This is exactly as it was that night. I haven't allowed anyone in except the police and myself." "Good. The fewer fingerprints, the better, even if they're wearing white gloves." I walked the perimeter slow, letting my eyes do the sniffing. Menus had been on those plates, water glasses placed with geometric precision. No obvious scuffs except a faint drag mark near the far end, like someone had leaned a chair back. Nothing you'd take to court, but I wasn't here for court. I was here to tell Wolfe what air felt like in the room. "You said the menus were printed that day?" I said. "Yes. In-house. We have a small print setup for tastings. Keeps things controlled." "Who handled printing?" "The floor manager, René. He designs the cards under Vale's supervision." René was not at dinner. "No, he left at 6. "Who set the room?" "I did, with Theodore. Sorry, Lowell, my assistant. We placed the menus at each setting. I locked the door at 7:30. Guests arrived at 8. "Lowell has access to the key?" "No, only me." She said it like a fact she wished was still true. "Then who else could duplicate it?" She didn't answer right away. Her gaze shifted to the door handle as if it might confess. "My partner, Everett Pike, used to have a key. We changed locks 2 months ago after a disagreement." "Did you get his back?" "He said he returned it." That was a nice sentence. It belonged in a fairy tale. Let's see the print area. We went down to a small office off the main floor. 2 high-end printers, stacks of card stock, a guillotine cutter that looked like it could take off a wrist without noticing. Cordelia opened a drawer, took out an untouched sheet. This is the stock. I ran a finger along it. Thick, creamy, slight linen texture. Not something you pick up at a corner store. If the inserted menu matched, the culprit got it from here or had the sense to steal a few sheets earlier. Who has access after hours? Renee, Vale, Kira Dam, Benno Cress, and me. No one else. You keep logs? We do. She pulled a tablet from the desk, tapped through a security app. Each door has a code. The print office, too. The dining room doesn't, only key. Any hits on the print office that afternoon? She scrolled. Renee was in here at 4, Vale at 5:10, Kira at 5:50, me at 6:45. No one else. Which means if a menu got swapped before the dinner, it happened in the dining room, not here. I looked up. Unless someone printed the fake earlier and carried it around in a coat like contraband. Her jaw set. Everett could have done that. Lionel Varick, too. He's an investor. He asked for the menu in advance. Did you give it? Of course. Standard courtesy. Standard courtesy is a breeding program for trouble. She started to say something, but a man's voice popped into the doorway behind us. Warm, charming, and just a little too smooth. Cordy, they're asking for you up front. I turned. The man was tall, handsome in an engineered way, with sandy hair and a coat that had never met bad weather. He wore concern like a lapel pin. Cordelia stiffened. Everett, we're in the middle of something. He noticed me then. Really noticed me. The way people do when they realize a stranger is standing near their private drawer. And this is Archie Goodwin, I said, offering a hand. Consultant, Mr. Wolfe. His eyebrows lifted a shade too quickly. Nero Wolfe. That seems dramatic for a menu mix-up. Depends what you're hungry for, I said. Cordelia held his gaze. Everett, I'll come in a minute. He gave her a look that was half warning, half plea. It's important. When he left, she exhaled through her nose. That was him, my partner. I figured. He has the aura of a man who thinks rooms are his by birthright. She rubbed her forehead once, then squared up again. What do you need from me next? Names, movements, and lies, I said. Start with Chef Vale. I want to talk to him while the smell of that half-pan is still in his head. She nodded. He's in the kitchen. Come. And as we headed that way, I couldn't help thinking about what she'd blurted before. Marina Holt had a secret to sell. Secrets don't float alone. They latch on to people like burrs. If Holt was selling, someone else was buying. Maybe someone at that table. Maybe someone who had lost patience with negotiating. Either way, the next course was coming up, and I had a feeling it wouldn't be as polite as the menu. The kitchen atty. L'Atelier Hearth was one of those places that looks like chaos, until you realize it's choreographed. Stainless steel everywhere, low voices, knives moving with the economy of men who'd rather cut onions than feelings. The air was thick with butter and heat and the kind of focus that makes you feel underdressed, even if you're wearing a tie. Cordelia threaded between stations like she belonged to the furniture. I followed, careful not to step in anything that might be a source or a career. She stopped at the pass, and a man turned from a simmering pot to face us. Lucian Vale was younger than I expected. Late 30s, perhaps. Lean, high-cheekboned, with a short beard that looked more like philosophy than fashion. He wore a white jacket that had survived a war, and his eyes had the quick, bright restlessness of someone who sleeps in 5-minute installments. Cordelia, he said. The voice was controlled, but not relaxed. I didn't know you were bringing company. This is Archie Goodwin, she told him. Mr. Wolfe is looking into what happened. Vale's nostrils flared slightly. The name stung him. Looking into a menu? We already... Humor me, I said. It's my job, and you don't want Miss Hearth paying for my lunch without getting her money's worth. He looked at her, then at me. Fine. Quick. I'm in service. I'll keep it tighter than your plating. Let's start with the half pan. Sea urchin custard. You say you found it in cold holding, labeled in your handwriting. It was my handwriting, he said flatly. That's why it made me sick to see it. Your handwriting can be forged. He gave me a look like I'd accused his mother of stealing salt. Not easily. Kira knows my hand. Benno does. Cordelia does. So someone who knows your hand and has seen you label pans might manage a fair imitation. His mouth tightened. Possible. But why label it at all? If you want her dead, you don't sign the weapon. Unless you want the weapon to point somewhere else, I said. Like at you. That landed. His eyes chilled a degree. Who knew Holt's allergy besides you and Cordelia? Everyone in the room knew. It's public. The staff knew because we were on high alert. Kira had the whole nut protocol taped to her soul. Benno knew because he set the pairings around it. Did any nuts enter this kitchen that day? No, I'd have burned the building down first. He said it without humor. We have walnuts in the dry storage for other dishes, but we locked them away before prep. I personally checked the stations. Did you personally check cold holding before service? Yes. At 7, we were clean. Then the custard got there after 7. He nodded once, impatient. After 7:30, no one entered the kitchen except Kira, Benno, and me. And Kira doesn't have the skill to make that custard without me knowing. It takes a specific set. I taught it to my last sous chef. Not her. What about Benno? Vale snorted. Benno can open a bottle like a priest opens a Bible. He can't cook sea urchin without poisoning himself. That makes 3 people inside. You, Kira, Benno, and Cordelia outside with a key to the dining room. Anyone else with access to cold holding? No. So if you didn't make it and Kira didn't make it and Benno didn't make it, either one of you is lying or someone got in who wasn't supposed to. His jaw flexed. Someone got in. Was that dinner your idea or Cordelia's? Cordelia's. She wanted Holt there because Holt owes us a debt. A debt? Vale's eyes flicked to Cordelia, then away. She trashed our opening 3 years ago, called the cooking ambitious but adolescent. We nearly went under. Now she came back wanting... He caught himself. Wanting what? I asked. Cordelia said evenly. Lucien. He shut his mouth like a door slammed. Ask her, he muttered, and turned back to his line like he'd just been asked to critique his own soul. Cordelia pulled me out of the kitchen before I could press him harder. We stepped into a narrow prep corridor lined with trays of mise en place and the soft hum of refrigeration. He's not making this easy, I said. He's angry, she replied, and scared. He thinks he's being set up. Maybe he is. Maybe he's not. But he knows something about Holt's debt. You were going to tell Wolfe that anyway, right? She looked at me straight on. Yes, but you weren't going to tell me. Not until I understood it myself. Fair, I said. Then help me understand. Why did Holt come to a private tasting with your business partner and a food investor and his wife? That sounds less like a review and more like a transaction. Her lips pressed into a line, then eased. Holt contacted me a week ago. She said she had information about Everett, about our partnership. She wanted money. Blackmail? She didn't use the word. She called it a chance to control the narrative. Cordelia's voice went brittle around the phrase. What narrative? She claimed Everett has been diverting funds, skimming, using the restaurant's accounts to cover personal debt. She said she had documents. She offered to sell them to me so I could confront him privately, or to sell them to Lionel Varick if I refused. That's a hell of a secret to carry to dinner. Yes, I invited Everett and Varick because I needed to see the temperature between them. Holt insisted on meeting all of us at once. She said it would save time. And when did you tell Holt about the tasting menu? I sent it to her that morning. She swallowed. She replied with one change suggestion. She wanted the chestnut velouté. It's her favorite kind of thing. Lucienne was pleased. So the course she liked got removed, replaced with something that would kill her. That feels personal. Cordelia stared past me down the corridor, eyes dark. Everett didn't know about her allergy protocols in the kitchen. Varick didn't either. Lucian did. Kira did. Benno did. And I did. And Holt herself. Yes. I nodded slowly. Wolfe was right. Murder doesn't start with a dish. It starts with a relationship. Now we had one relationship surfaced like a bone in soup. Holt and Everett Pike, tied together by money and rot. Where is Holt now? I asked. At home. She refused the hospital. She said she only felt faint. Cordelia's voice sharpened. She also said she was done with amateurs. Then she left the dinner early. Convenient again. It wasn't convenient for me. No, I said. It was convenient for whoever didn't want her dead in your dining room. Yet, Cordelia stiffened. You think she staged it? I think she's a critic. Critics live on drama and timing. Either she was genuinely sick or she smelled the walnut coming. If she smelled it, she wasn't the target so much as a participant. Her face tightened. God. Yeah, and he doesn't do menus here. I pulled my notebook out. I need to talk to Kira Dam and Benno Crest next, separately. And then I want to look at your security footage for that corridor between 7 and 8. She nodded, already moving. I'll arrange it. As she walked ahead, I felt the case settle into its next shape. We had a likely motive on the table, blackmail and embezzlement. We had a possible setup in the kitchen, and we had a critic who might not be as startled by death as she pretended. I wasn't even through the appetizers, and already something in the room was starting to smell like a second course. Cordelia delivered Kira Dam to me the way you'd present a witness to a judge, promptly and with an undertone of apology for the inconvenience. She found us a small glass-walled office off the kitchen corridor, the kind of place managers use to fire people without splashing sauce on the paperwork. It had 2 chairs, a table that was more theory than furniture, and enough visibility to make anyone unself-conscious. Kira came in wiping her hands on her apron, though her hands were already clean. Mid-20s, hair pulled into a tight bun, eyes wide-set and too alert for someone who probably hadn't slept since Thanksgiving. She took the chair as if she'd been told to, then looked at Cordelia like a student waiting for instructions. Cordelia said, Kira, answer Mr. Goodwin's questions. I'll be just outside. When she left, Kira's posture slackened an inch. Not relief. More like the fear changed flavor. I said, You're not in trouble from me. I'm here because somebody tried to turn a tasting dinner into a funeral. I'd like to stop them. She nodded fast. Yes, I want that too. Good. Start at 7 o'clock the night of the dinner. Chef Vale checked cold holding and says it was clean. You were on prep until service. Did you go near cold holding after 7? No, she said. Only Lucian checks it before tastings. He doesn't like surprises. So you didn't put the sea urchin custard there? She flinched. God, no. I didn't even know it was there until after. Could you have made it if you wanted to? Her eyes flashed with something like insult. I could make it, yes, but not that night. We were slammed with last-minute changes, and Lucien would have known. He tastes everything. Who else was in the kitchen between 7 and 8? Benno came in around 7:40 to check wine temperatures. He always does. And Lucien, of course. That's it. We locked down. No runners, no dishwashers. For tastings, it's just leads. Anybody leave and come back? She shook her head. Lucien didn't. I didn't. Benno left once to get something from his office. How long? 2 minutes. Maybe 3. Did he pass cold holding on the way? Yes. It's right there. She gestured vaguely toward the hall. But the alcove is locked and he doesn't have the key. Unless he did. Her mouth compressed. He doesn't, Lucien keeps it on him. He'd rather bite off his own tongue than let Benno touch seafood. Do you know Benno well? She made a face that said enough to regret it. We work together, that's all. Were you at the dinner table? No, Lucien and I stayed in the kitchen. We sent courses out. Cordelia took them at the pass and served. Chef said Holt wanted the chestnut velouté. True? Yes. She emailed that morning. Lucien was smug about it all day. Did anyone besides you and Chef see that email? She hesitated. Cordelia might have. She and Lucien share menu notes, and... Everett Pike came through the kitchen around 6:30. He was restless. He asked about timing. Did he see the allergy protocol posted? Maybe. It was on the board near the prep list. Okay. I watched her for a second. There was something she wasn't saying, not about the custard, about the people. Kira, was there tension in the kitchen about that dinner? Anything personal? Anyone arguing? She swallowed. Lucien and Cordelia argued earlier, quietly. He was upset Holt was there. Why? Because of the old review? Because of Everett. She blurted it and then looked horrified like she dropped a knife. Go on. She stared at the tabletop. Lucien thinks Everett is bleeding the restaurant. He said it to me last week. He said if Cordelia doesn't cut him loose, the place will die. Did he say that to Everett? Not directly. But Everett knows Lucien hates him. Everett jokes about it. He calls him the genius with the grudge. And Benno, any beef with Everett or Holt? She shook her head quickly, then slower. Benno and Everett are close. They drink together after service sometimes. Everett treats him like a pal. And Holt? I don't know Holt, only that she's dangerous. The word came out flatly, as if she'd learned it from watching other chefs' careers get chewed up. I nodded, filed it. Kira was scared, but she didn't feel like a liar. She was also watching her own words carefully, which usually means somebody taught her too. Either Lucien or fear. All right, I said. One more thing. When Benno left to get something from his office, did anything else happen? Any delivery? Any door opening? No. She frowned, searching. Wait. The back service door buzzed once around 7:50. I remember because it startled me. But it's an intercom line from the cellar. Sometimes Lowell uses it if he's checking stock. Did anyone answer it? Lucien did. He said, "Not now." And it went quiet. Cellar access, I murmured. Restaurants have more back ways than temptation. Who besides Lucien has cellar access? Cordelia, Lowell, Benno for wine, Everett sometimes if he wants to show off to investors. Did Everett have reason to be down there that night? She shook her head. Not that I know, but he wanders. Thanks, Kira. You've helped. She stood too fast, then paused. Mr. Goodwin. Yeah. I don't think Lucien did this. It came out in a rush. He's furious, yes, but he would never poison someone in Cordelia's room. He worships food. He wouldn't use it to kill. I gave her my easiest grin. In my business, people who worship things still do stupid stuff for them, but I hear you. When she left, Cordelia slipped back in, face unreadable. Kira mentioned a buzz from the cellar door at 7:50, I said. That's new. Cordelia's eyes narrowed. No one told me that. Maybe no one knew it mattered. Now it does. Benno's next. She nodded, and I could see her trying to keep her restaurant from becoming a chessboard. But it already was. Someone had moved a piece through a door that didn't squeak, and the trick now was to figure out who had been holding the queen. We walked down the corridor toward Benno's domain, the wine office, and I was thinking of that buzz. Cellar door at 7:50, cold holding clean at 7, Holt leaving sick just before the walnut course. The timing was tight, like a hand in a pocket, which meant whoever did it took a risk. And risks mean pressure, Pressure makes people sweat. My job was to find who was sweating and catch the drip before it hit Wolfe's chair. Benno Kress kept his office the way some men keep a chapel, hushed, cool, and arranged for ritual. Racks of bottles marched along the walls in disciplined rows, each with a small tag like a nameplate. A narrow tasting table sat under a lamp with warm light that made everything look more honest than it probably was. The air smelled of cork and old oak and money that had learned patience. Benno himself was leaning over a ledger when we came in, pen in hand, shoulders slightly hunched like a man bracing for weather. Early 40s, hair going silver at the temples, eyes the pale blue of skim milk, pleasant until you realized they never quite warmed. He looked up with a practiced smile that didn't reach the eyes. Cordelia. Archie. I assume this isn't about the Burgundy shipment. No, Cordelia said. Mr. Goodwin has questions. Please answer them. She stayed by the door, arms folded, gaze fixed on Benno the way you watch a dog that might bolt or bite. I took the chair opposite him without asking. Benno, I said, you were at the tasting dinner. You were also in the kitchen around 7:40 to check wine temperatures. True? Yes. His pen hovered above the paper. It's part of my job. Did you leave the kitchen during that window? He blinked once. To fetch a decanter from here. I was gone only a moment. Kira says 2 or 3 minutes. That sounds right. He set the pen down carefully, too carefully. Why? Because cold holding is on your path, and a dish that wasn't supposed to be there showed up in cold holding. His pupils tightened a shade. I don't cook. I'm aware. But you do have cellar access. You do have the run of the place. And you do know Holt's allergy. Cordelia stiffened. Benno's smile faded into something more brittle. Everyone knows her allergy, he said. She trumpets it in every profile. Sure, but you were closer to the kitchen than most of the guests. If a dish needed to get from somewhere else into cold holding, your 2-minute absence is a neat little gap. He let that sit, then shook his head slowly. I did not place any dish in cold holding. I wasn't even carrying anything besides a decanter. Where were you when you left? By the pass. Anyone see you go out? Chef Vale did. Kira probably did. I told them what I was doing. That helps, but it doesn't close the gap. I leaned forward. Tell me about the cellar buzzer at 7:50. His eyes flicked to Cordelia for the briefest moment. Then back to me. The cellar buzzer? Back service intercom. Kira heard it. Vale answered. Benno's jaw moved like he was chewing on a cork. I don't recall a buzzer. That's weird, I said pleasantly, because it's not a subtle sound in a quiet kitchen, and you'd been in and out of the cellar earlier for wine staging, right? Yes, earlier, he swallowed. But by 7:50 I was preparing pairings. I wasn't thinking about the buzzer. Were you in this office when it buzzed? He hesitated a fraction. Yes, I believe so. You believe so. That's a squishy way to say you were here. His face tightened. Mr. Goodwin, are you accusing me? I'm doing what I'm paid to do. Accusations come later, once my boss has all the pieces lined up like your Pinot Noir. Cordelia stepped forward, voice low. Benno, if you're hiding something, now is the time. His head turned toward her, and I caught a flash of something, hurt, annoyance, before he smoothed it away. I'm not hiding anything. I'm as appalled as you are. Appalled people remember details, I said. He drew a slow breath, then said, Fine. I was here from 7:43 to 7:48. I wasn't in the kitchen long enough to notice every sound. When I came back, I did not return to the kitchen until after the 3rd course. If the buzzer happened, I missed it. 7:43 to 7:48. I scribbled it. How do you know that precisely? His mouth went thin. Because I logged the opening of the cellar cage at 7:45. I check the time when I open it. Habit. Show me. He opened a cabinet and pulled out a small notebook with neat spidery entries, bottle counts, dates, lock checks. He tapped a line. 7:45 p.m., cage opened, 2 mines, Varick request. Varick? I said. Lionel Varick asked for something at 7:45. Yes. Benno's voice steadied a notch, like he'd found safe ground. He wanted to see the 1999 Vosna Romane you'd mentioned in the tasting notes. He's a collector. He asked to inspect the bottle. Cordelia's eyebrows shot up. Lionel was in the cellar. Briefly. Benno spread his hands. He cornered me near the washroom. He said he wanted a look. It was harmless, so I obliged. So you took him down, I said, or you brought the bottle up? I took him down. He wanted to see where we store, and I don't say no to investors. Did anyone else go with you? No. Did he touch anything besides the bottle? Benno frowned, offended. No. He held it, admired it, asked about provenance. Then he went back upstairs. I locked the cage. And during those 2 minutes, you were in the cellar with Lionel Varick. I let the sentence hang like smoke. Did Everett Pike know you were taking him down there? I don't know. Everett was talking to Marina Holt at the time, I think. Cordelia's face had gone stiff in a different way now, the way it does when you realize your house has another door you forgot to lock. She said, Lionel never mentioned going to the cellar. Why would he? Benno said. He didn't break anything. He was curious. Curious men sometimes are, I said, and sometimes they're not. Benno went pale, then colored. You think Lionel did this? He can't cook either. He might not need to cook if somebody cooked for him, I said, or if the custard came from outside. You said yourself a dish labeled in Vale's hand was planted. The cellar connects to the back service corridor. If someone wanted to sneak something into cold holding without walking through the dining room, the cellar is the route. Benno stared at me, then at Cordelia. This is madness. Madness is optional, I said. Mechanics aren't. I closed my notebook. One more thing. You and Everett Pike are close. A flicker. Too quick. We're friends. Does he owe you money? He recoiled like I'd slapped him. No. Does Lionel? No. Does Marina Holt? His throat bobbed. Marina Holt doesn't owe anyone. She takes. Cordelia's voice sharpened. Benno. He looked at her with a tired kind of loyalty. She's ruined men, Cordy. Not just restaurants. People. If she was blackmailing Everett, that's on brand. And if someone wanted to stop her, I said softly, poisoning her with a tragic allergy accident is also on brand for someone who knows restaurants. Benno opened his mouth, closed it, then said, I didn't do this, but if you're looking for motive, look at Everett. Look at what he stands to lose. That's already on the menu, I said. When we stepped back into the corridor, Cordelia was quiet for a few strides. Then she said, Lionel in my cellar, alone, with Benno, while Marina was upstairs with Everett. Yeah. I rubbed my chin. And the buzzer at 7:50. If Lionel came back up at 7:47 or 48, he could have buzzed to be let into the corridor again, or someone down there could have. Timing fits. Her voice went flat. Lionel is a guest. He invested because he believed in us. Investors believe in a lot of things, mostly returns. I glanced at her. You said Holt threatened to sell evidence to Lionel if you didn't buy it first. How did Lionel react to Holt that night? She swallowed. Like a man trying not to show interest, he asked careful questions. He watched Everett. He watched me. Did Holt say anything about the evidence at the table? No. She insisted we talk after the tasting, privately. She said she didn't want to spoil appetites. I snorted. Mission accomplished anyway. We reached the front of the restaurant where the lunch crowd had started thinning. I could see Everett Pike through the glass, leaning at the bar with that controlled ease of his, laughing with a couple of regulars, as if the word attempted murder hadn't passed through his building 2 nights ago. Cordelia followed my gaze. Her expression didn't soften. "He looks relaxed." "Yeah," I said. "Either he's innocent or he's very comfortable with risk." I pulled my coat tighter. "I'm going to pay Marina Holt a visit. If she's selling secrets, I want to know what the price tag buys, and I want to know who's already shopping." Cordelia nodded once, like it hurt. "Call me if you need anything." "Count on it." I started toward the door, then paused. "Oh, and Cordelia." "Yes?" "Change your cellar. Codes. Today. And don't tell anyone you've done it." Her eyes widened slightly. "Do you think someone will come back?" "I think someone already did." I pushed out into the street, letting the cold slap me awake. "And they didn't buzz the cellar just to admire your wine." Marina Holt lived on the east side in a building that had a doorman who looked like he could cross-examine a bishop. I gave him my name and my most harmless smile, and he dialed upstairs without asking who I was to her. That meant I wasn't the first visitor she'd had lately, or he'd been told to expect people. Either way, the elevator carried me up like a discreet rumor. Her apartment door opened on the second knock. She didn't bother with chains. If you make a living poking bears, you stop worrying about teeth. Marina Holt was smaller than her reputation, not fragile, wiry. Late 30s, hair cut in a blunt, dark bob, eyes sharp enough to fillet you. She wore black slacks and a loose sweater as if she dressed to be unmemorable, then failed by being herself. "Goodwin," she said. No question. "Wolfe's." Word travels faster than taxis in this town. "I run a newsletter." "Sit down." That was an order in a voice that didn't expect debate. I sat, mostly because I wanted to see what kind of room a woman builds when she makes enemies for sport. It was clean, spare, and full of books. Not cozy, not cold. Controlled. There was a faint smell of coffee and, oddly, oranges. She perched in an armchair across from me, one ankle tucked over the other. "Cordelia sent you." "Wolfe sent me. Cordelia's the client. You're the almost corpse." Her mouth twitched. Almost. If I'd eaten that thing, I'd be a headline by now, maybe even a tasteful one. But I didn't. Because you felt ill. Because I recognized a setup. She said it matter-of-factly, like spotting a bad reduction. The menu card wasn't the one I'd been emailed. I knew it the moment I sat down. Chestnut velouté missing, something with walnut inserted. I'm allergic to walnuts. Too convenient to be accidental. I blinked. "You saw it before the course arrived?" "Yes." "And you didn't tell anyone?" "No." "That's either brave or stupid." "It's strategic," she said. I wanted to see who squirmed. "Did anyone?" "Everett did. Not openly, but his eyes went to the card twice. Lionel Varick didn't look surprised. Benno nearly dropped a glass when the course was called. Vale looked like he'd been slapped. Benno nearly dropped a glass. Interesting. How could you see that from the dining room?" She lifted a shoulder. "The pass window. I watch kitchens. It's my hobby and my job." "So you left early to avoid the walnut course?" "I left early because I wasn't in the mood to die for entertainment." Her eyes narrowed. "But I stayed long enough to learn something." "Which was?" "Everett Pike is in trouble, and Cordelia knows it. She's just hoping it isn't true." "That's what you told her?" She laughed once, humorless. "I told her more than that. I told her Everett's been skimming accounts through a shell vendor. I've copies of invoices and transfers. I offered her first rights." "First rights to what?" "Blackmail." "Don't be melodramatic," she said. "It's leverage. It's insurance. This city runs on information. I happen to collect it." "Why target Everett?" She tilted her head. "Because he's sloppy. Because he's using a restaurant to cover a private loan with a predatory interest clause. Because when a partner steals from a place people love, it's not just money. It's betrayal." She said that last word like it tasted bad. "You're a critic, not a priest. Same profession, different tools." "All right," I said. You expected Cordelia to buy your evidence. She didn't. So you invited the whole crew to dinner. Why? Her gaze stayed on me, cool and steady. Because I wanted Lionel Varick to see Everett with his own eyes. Lionel is cautious. He won't move on a rumor. But if he watches a man sweat, he draws lines. I'm guessing Lionel's investment contract has clauses about fraud. Of course it does. Lionel knows how to protect himself. What he didn't know, until I told him privately before dinner, is that Everett's debt holder has started leaning on him. Hard, the kind of hard that makes men desperate. Debt holder? Name? She smiled slightly. You don't ask for the recipe before you taste. Marina, this is serious. Someone tried to kill you. Someone tried to scare me, she corrected. If they wanted me dead, they'd have made sure I ate it. This was a warning or a frame. Either way, it's a message. From who? That's your job. She leaned forward. But here's a free sample. The custard didn't come from their kitchen. That dish is too smooth for Vale. He'd have added acidity. It was made by someone else. Someone who knows fine dining, but not Vale's palate. I felt my eyebrows climb. You tasted it? I took a dab with a spoon before I left. No walnut on the surface. The crumble was separate. Whoever built it planned for a visible allergen to be added at service. That's theater, not assassination. Meaning they wanted witnesses to connect walnut to your allergy. Exactly. Her eyes shone with something like satisfaction. They wanted Cordelia to panic. They wanted Vale to look guilty. They wanted Everett to lose his footing. Or they wanted Lionel to. That's a lot of wants. People are busy when money and ego collide. She sat back. Now, tell Wolfe this. I won't go to the police yet. But if this mess isn't cleaned up, I'll publish everything. Not just about Everett, about all of them. Even if it paints a target on you, she shrugged. Targets keep me relevant. I stood. You're either the bravest woman in New York or the dumbest. She gave me a cool smile. Both, on alternating days. At the door I paused. One more thing. If the debt holder is leaning on Everett and you told Lionel about it, who else knew? Her expression didn't change, but her eyes did. Just a flicker. No one I didn't want to. Name? She met my stare. Juno Varick, Lionel's wife. She's not just a wife. She's his gatekeeper. She hears everything he hears. Did she react to your warning? She smiled and asked if I wanted coffee. That's her reaction to why the world ends. Don't underestimate her. I filed that too because I've learned over the years that people who smile at endings are either saints or arsonists. By the time I hit the sidewalk, the cold had teeth and the case had new bones. Holt had clocked the swapped menu immediately, kept quiet to watch reactions, and sampled the custard just enough to decide it was outsider work. She'd named Everett's embezzlement a predatory debt, and slid Juno Varick into the frame like a new piece on the board. I hailed a cab, already composing the report in my head. When I walked into the brownstone an hour later, Wolfe was in his office, hands tented, eyes on the fire. He didn't look up. Archie, he said, you have learned something. Yeah, I said, tossing my coat over the chair, and it's not just about menus. Proceed. I opened my notebook. Marina Holt knew the menu was swapped the moment she sat down. She recognized walnut, knew she was being set up, and stayed quiet to watch who reacted. She says Everett glanced at the card twice like it was a snake. Lionel didn't look surprised. Benno nearly dropped a glass when the course was called, and Vale looked blindsided. Wolfe's eyes opened a fraction more. Interesting. She tasted the custard. Says it wasn't Vale's work. Too smooth, no acidity, meaning it likely came from outside, and walnut crumble was meant to be added in front of witnesses for theater. Warning or frame, not surefire murder. Wolfe made a small sound of approval. And the secret to sell, he asked. Holt has invoices and transfers showing Everett skimming through a shell vendor. She offered to sell evidence to Cordelia and also tipped Lionel privately before dinner because Everett's being squeezed by a nasty debt holder. She thinks that pressure is making him desperate. Wolfe's mouth tightened. The debt holder's name? She didn't give it, but she did say she told Lionel's wife, Juno Varick, too. She called Juno a gatekeeper. Wolfe leaned back slightly, like a man settling into a chair that finally fits. So, we have a warning posed as an attempted allergy death. We have financial malfeasance. We have a critic who chooses to observe rather than flee. And we have a cellar buzzer at approximately the moment Lionel Varick was in the cellar with Benno. He looked at me. Archie, what do you infer? I infer somebody wants the spotlight on Everett or Vale, and they want Cordelia rattled and Lionel primed. I also infer that the Custards' road trip through the cellar isn't a coincidence. Wolfe nodded once. Good. Tomorrow morning you will return to the restaurant. You will speak with Mr. Varick and his wife. Separately, you will also acquire a list of vendors who had deliveries that day, particularly those supplying seafood. On it. He paused. And Archie? Yeah? Be attentive to the menus in this house. I grinned. Boss, after today, I'm going to inspect Fritz's soup like it's evidence. Do so, he said gravely. An enemy who chooses food as a weapon is either extremely clever or extremely desperate. Both conditions require caution. Caution, I said, heading for the kitchen where Fritz was no doubt sharpening a ladle. Right up until it's inconvenient. Behind me, Wolfe added, almost to himself. And then it becomes decisive. By 9 the next morning, the brownstone had done its trick of turning a noisy city into a muffled rumor. Wolfe was in the office, immovable as a courthouse, and I was at my desk with a fresh stack of notes, a cup of coffee, and the faint feeling that somewhere in Manhattan somebody was about to regret thinking they were smarter than a fat man in an armchair. We had spent the day before filling in the blanks Wolfe hates leaving to chance. I'd gone back to L'Atelier hearth, talked to Lionel Varick in his clipped banker's voice, watched Juno Varick smile like porcelain while her eyes counted exits, and pulled the vendor list. The sea urchin had come in by a boutique importer at noon. No walnut products had been ordered or delivered. The custard dish itself wasn't on any prep sheet and wasn't something you could whip up in 10 minutes without leaving a crater in the kitchen's rhythm. Whoever made it had made it elsewhere, transported it cold, and threaded it into the restaurant by a route that avoided the dining room, a route that made the cellar buzzer feel like a neon arrow. Lionel admitted he'd gone to the cellar with Benno at 7:45, but shrugged it off as curiosity. Juno admitted nothing, but her hands were too still and her questions too careful. Everett Pike, when I finally pinned him for 10 minutes at the bar, laughed at the very idea of stealing from Cordelia the way a man laughs when he's already rehearsed for court. Vale was simmering rage in a chef's whites. Benno was frightened and loyal in equal measure. Kira was scared of the world and protective of Vale the way puppies protect thunder. That morning, Wolfe had phoned Cordelia and told her to bring everyone to the brownstone at 4, inside his office, under his rules. She did it without asking why. She was done improvising. At 3:55, Fritz put out coffee on the side table with a look that said he hoped none of these people intended to bleed on the rug. At 4:02, the doorbell started earning overtime. When the last of them was seated, Cordelia near Wolfe, Everett Pike lounging too comfortably in the red leather chair, Lucien Vale rigid on the sofa as if a chairback were an insult, Kira perched like a sparrow beside him, Benno Kress holding his hat with both hands, Lionel Varick in a dark suit that made him look like a judge, and Juno Varick in a grey coat so elegant it could have testified in court. Wolfe surveyed the room like a man choosing which of his orchids might disappoint him least. He spoke softly. You're all here because 2 nights ago, in Miss Harth's private dining room, an attempt was made to cause the death of Marina Holt by exploiting her allergy to walnuts. The attempt failed for reasons irrelevant to the culprit's intention. I've now determined who arranged it. Everett gave a genial shrug. With respect, Mr. Wolfe, that's a melodramatic way to describe a kitchen mistake. Wolfe's eyes slid to him. If it were a mistake, sir, it would have been made by a novice. Yet the menu card was printed on identical stock, with identical typography, and substituted prior to the dinner. A dish containing sea urchin custard was introduced into cold holding after 7 o'clock. The walnut crumble, its visible fatal component, was prepared to be added at service in the sight of witnesses. That is not a mistake. It is theatre. Lionel cleared his throat. You mean someone wanted us to see the walnut? Precisely. The objective was not merely to kill Miss Holt. It was to ensure that her death appeared accidental, while simultaneously directing blame. Wolfe shifted his hands, still tented. Blame toward Chef Vale, whose handwriting labeled the pan. Blame toward Miss Harth, in whose dining room the accident occurred. Blame toward Mr. Pike, who was already vulnerable to Miss Holt's accusations. Cordelia went white at the word vulnerable. Everett stiffened. Wolfe continued. Since the dish was not made in the restaurant, it was brought from outside. The only ingress to the kitchen without passing through the dining room is via the cellar corridor, accessible by key and code. At 7:45 p.m., Mr. Varick, escorted by Mr. Kress, visited the cellar to inspect a wine. The record attests. At approximately 7:50 p.m., the cellar buzzer sounded. Chef Vale answered it, and the corridor was used. This sequence is the hinge upon which the case turns. Juno's smile didn't move, but her eyes sharpened. I noticed because that's my job. Wolfe said, Mr. Kress, you were truthful. Mr. Varick, you were careless but not culpable. Chef Vale, your indignation is justified. Ms. Dam, your loyalty is admirable. Mr. Pike, his gaze landed on Everett like a marble paperweight. You are guilty of financial impropriety, not of attempted murder. Your thief's instinct has made you suspectable. It has not made you the murderer. Everett's mouth opened in outrage. Cordelia made a small, involuntary sound like air leaving a punctured tire. Wolfe lifted a hand. Explanation will come. Everett snapped, You can't toss around accusations like that. I can, Wolfe said mildly, and if I choose, I shall substantiate them for Miss Harth's counsel and Inspector Kramer, but your embezzlement is incidental to this room's larger purpose. Lionel leaned forward. Then who? Wolfe turned his head the barest increment toward Juno Varick. Mrs. Varick. The name fell on the room like a dropped glass. Juno did not move. She only looked at Wolfe with the polite interest of someone at a lecture. That's absurd, Lionel said tightly. Juno, silence, Wolfe said, not raising his voice. Lionel went silent anyway because Wolfe doesn't shout. He arranges. Juno finally spoke. Mr. Wolfe, I don't know what game you're playing, but I assure you, it is not a game, madam. It is a demonstration. Wolfe's tone stayed even. You knew Marina Holt's allergy because she told you. You knew she intended to sell evidence of Mr. Pike's theft to your husband if Miss Harth refused. You are your husband's gatekeeper. You perceived an opportunity. Opportunity for what? She asked smoothly. For control. Wolfe's eyes were cold now. Your husband's investment in L'Atelier was not philanthropy. He required a reliable partner at Miss Harth's side. Mr. Pike is unreliable. Miss Holt's evidence threatened to remove him in a public scandal that could injure your husband's capital. Yet if Marina Holt died an accidental death in the restaurant, the scandal would be catastrophic. Your husband would withdraw, purchase the wreckage for a fraction, and you would install a new structure of your choosing, without Mr. Pike, without Miss Harth's full authority, and with Chef Vale beholden to the new patron. Cordelia gasped. You're saying she wanted to ruin us? No. Wolfe looked at Cordelia almost kindly. She wanted to own you. Juno's face remained composed, but a faint flush rose at her throat. A tidy story. Not evidence. Evidence, Wolfe said. Very well. You commissioned the custard from a former chef now working privately. One who knows fine dining but not Vale's palate. You delivered it yourself via the cellar corridor, using codes you possessed because you had obtained them from Mr. Cress in a moment of conviviality. Mr. Cress, you mentioned that you and Mrs. Varick spoke often at the bar. He values patrons. He would not refuse a request phrased as curiosity. Benno's eyes widened, then dropped. He looked sick. Wolfe went on. You arranged to be in the cellar at 7:45 by urging your husband to ask for the Von Romanet. You knew Mr. Cress would escort him. When they were in the cage, you approached the cellar corridor door, buzzed, and when Vale responded irritably, you entered. You placed the custard in cold holding, labeled it in Vale's hand, because you had samples of his handwriting on menu drafts your husband had requested in advance, and left by the same route. Everett spluttered. How the hell would she know his handwriting? Wolfe didn't glance at him. Because she is not careless. She read the notes Lionel demanded before he invested. She is meticulous about her husband's risks. That is why she's dangerous. Lionel stared at his wife as if he were meeting her for the first time. Juno, tell him he's wrong. Juno's smile finally faltered. Just a hair. You're a clever man, Mr. Wolfe, but clever men sometimes mistake patterns for truth. Wolfe nodded slightly. Perhaps. Therefore, we shall test. Archie. I stood and opened the small envelope I'd been waiting to open. This morning, on Wolfe's instruction, I visited a Mr. Raphael Klein, private chef. He didn't want to talk until I showed him a cancelled check made out to him from a holding company called Greenridge Hospitality. He confirmed he made a sea urchin custard 2 nights ago for a private client who insisted on walnut crumble added separately at service. Greenridge Hospitality is registered to a Midtown mailbox. The authorized signatory is Juno Varick. That did it. You can fake a smile. You can't fake a paper trail. Juno sat still for a second longer, as if the room might rearrange itself, then her shoulders sank a fraction. Less defeat than irritation at being caught. So, she said quietly, Marina Holt still lives. No one was harmed. Your story is elaborate for an offense that didn't occur. It occurred, Wolfe said. Intention is the crime. Harm is merely its success. Cordelia found her voice. Why? Why would you do that? Juno looked at her with something close to pity. Because you are talented and naive, Cordelia. Because Everett was bleeding you. Because Lucian is brilliant and volatile. Because my husband's money was in a house built on shifting sand. I was stabilizing the foundation. By killing a woman, Cordelia snapped. By scaring her, Juno corrected. Calm again. She wanted leverage. I showed her the cost of playing in my kitchen. If she died, it would have been regrettable. But markets dislike uncertainty more than morality. Lionel stood up so fast his chair scraped. You used my investment to justify... To protect it, she said, and there was steel under the silk. You don't win by being kind, Lionel. You win by being early. Wolfe's voice cut through the air softer than a knife, but sharper. You will not win here, madam. Archie has already called Inspector Kramer. Your confession, however elegant, will be repeated to him. Your husband will decide whether he wishes to accompany you to the precinct or to divorce you before you arrive. Lionel looked like he'd been punched by scripture. Benno looked like he might faint. Vale's jaw was a locked gate. Everett Pike had slid into a stunned sort of silence, because a man who thinks he's the villain hates discovering he's just a subplot. Juno rose, smoothing her coat with a composure that almost convinced me she'd planned this too. You're all sentimental people, she said. That's why you needed him. She nodded once at Wolfe and walked toward the hall. She didn't run. She didn't need to. Kramer would meet her at the door. When it was over and the house had emptied of its tension, Cordelia stayed behind. She looked 10 years older than yesterday, but also cleaner somehow, like a fever had broken. Wolfe regarded her. You were betrayed twice, Ms. Harth. By your partner's greed and by your patron's ambition, you will survive if you choose wisely. She nodded, eyes wet but steady. Everett will be gone, today, and Lionel. I don't know. Nor should you decide now, Wolfe said. You have a chef who reveres his craft, a sous chef who reveres him, and a sommelier who reveres your patrons too much. Rebuild with discernment. She managed a tight smile. Thank you, Mr. Wolfe. Archie. After she left, I stood in the doorway, watching the quiet settle back into the brownstone the way dust settles on old books. Wolfe sat in his chair, looking satisfied in that reserved, purely intellectual way that means he's already eaten the heart of the matter. Fritz came in to announce dinner, something rich and patient that smelled like forgiveness. Wolfe said, almost contemplatively, Archie, there is a particular vulgarity in using food as a weapon. It profanes both appetite and trust, yet it also reveals character with admirable clarity. Yeah, I said, following him toward the dining room. Nothing like a menu to show you what people are really hungry for. He paused. And for some, hunger is indistinguishable from possession. That's the trouble, I said. Some folks can't tell the difference between owning a restaurant and owning the people in it. Wolfe lowered himself at the table, napkin unfolding like a treaty. They learn, he said, or they are taught. I picked up my fork. And tonight, boss? Tonight, he said, eyes on Fritz's masterpiece. We eat in peace. I looked at the roast, then at Wolfe, and decided peace had its perks. Works for me, I said, but I'm still checking the menu first.